Hello and welcome to DEI Advisors. My name is Lan Elliott on behalf of DEI Advisors, and I'm really thrilled today to welcome Ashli Johnson to our program. Ashli was recently appointed as the first executive director of Howard University's newly created Marriott-Sorenson Center for Hospitality Leadership. Welcome, Ashli.
Thank you so much for having me, Lan. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I wanted to start, kind of at the beginning of your career. And I know you, let me describe a little bit about your current role. You've had a number of roles as a hospitality educator, and you've been an equity and inclusion champion along the way. That's how I got to know you. And your newest role is really exciting, establishing Howard University's first ever hospitality program, which was founded in honor of the late Arnie Sorenson, Marriott International's former CEO. And Howard University is really one of the most prestigious HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities in the United States. And so I think with DC being such a hub for hospitality companies, it's about time that we had a great program at Howard University. I'm so thrilled that they appointed you to start the program and establish it. So, but can you share a little bit about your journey and the factors that contributed to your success along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have really been honored. I count it as a privilege to have known that this was the industry for me for a very long time. I grew up in a military family. My father is a retired Marine Corps officer. And in the latter part of his career, his MOS was food service. And so I think the hospitality bug bit not only myself, but also my older brother. And so we both work in the business now. So I always knew that I wanted to do something in hospitality. And so that is sort of what started carving out my pathway in hospitality. And so I studied hospitality, resort and spa management at the University of West Florida in Pensacola, Florida. And I think early on in my career, what was most beneficial to me was just saying yes to opportunities that presented themselves. And so, whenever there was an opportunity on campus, we had guest speakers. If there was an opportunity to travel to a conference, I was always saying yes to that. And that really afforded me the opportunity to be in rooms that a lot of young people were not finding themselves in, particularly at that time. And so I would say certainly saying yes to opportunities that presented themselves, but I also sought out learning opportunities not only beyond the classroom, but also beyond, my employer. And so even once I was working full time in industry, of course, there are a plethora of resources likely made available to most folks through their human resource training and development departments. I was leveraging not only those resources, but I was also always looking out in industry for additional resources. So I didn't let, affordability stopped me. If I needed to save up money to make an investment in myself, to attend a conference, or to be able to afford a certification, I was going to make it happen one way or another. And I would also say, equally as important as those first 2 points is cultivating the right relationships. I made it a point to not just collect business cards. Starting early on in my career, I wanted to make sure that I was being intentional about connecting with people, about adding value to whatever the relationship was or what it could be, and always made it a point to keep in touch with people even when I didn't need something from them. And so that served me well.
That's wonderful. Saying yes to opportunities and just really understanding and being intentional about networking from a really young age. Not a lot of people do that. I know I didn't do that. So that's really great advice. Let's talk about a little bit your early career, because as you mentioned, you're a very intentional person. And I've learned that about you. But early in your career, you had a number of different roles. And we talked about how people had labeled you a job hopper, which you didn't really like that label because you had a plan and you were very intentional about the roles you took. Can you share a little bit about how you developed your plan and how those early roles fit into your plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was maybe 19 years old, I attended my very first hotel owners conference, and it absolutely blew my mind, right? I had no clue that people owned hotels. Certainly had no idea that people that looked like me owned hotels. I think I had the normal assumption that, brands own and operate each of the hotels that we sort of see along the way of our daily journeys. And so once that little door was open for me, I knew that I needed to get to ownership, but I also recognized that likely no organization was going to prepare me to be an owner, right? It's a bit counterintuitive. They want you to work for them, but why would you be an owner? There really wasn't a clear-cut pathway or a handbook that that was available at the time. And so I really just started taking copious notes on the owners that I did have access to, right? What skill sets did they have? What industries were they coming from? Where did they amass this? Where did they get this capital from? And who were they being connected to at the time? And so certainly early on in my career, my first job out of undergrad, I was a corporate management trainee for Lowe's Hotels. And I was fortunate to have a ton of offers coming out of school. And so many folks asked, hey, why didn't you go with company A or company X? Or didn't those folks say that they were going to let you live in Hawaii for 2 years? Why wouldn't you say yes to that? And so I said yes to Lowe's Hotels because at the time they were preparing for a period of rapid growth. I knew that the company was going to be expanding. Therefore, I knew that there had to be a development arm that was going to be created sooner than later. And so that's just sort of like one example of why I said yes to that opportunity, is because I knew that if I could be in the room as this company was growing and expanding, I could sort of start learning some of these principles of development, acquisition, conversion, et cetera, et cetera. And so every step along the way, I always walked into an opportunity with a mindset of there is something in this role that I need. It's a skill set that I need to develop. Perhaps it's relationships that I need to develop. Perhaps it is, a competency that I had not yet been exposed to, but I knew that I could get that from the role. And most certainly in exchange, I knew that I was bringing my very best to the role too. So it was very much a win-win equation. But when folks wanted to label me as a job hopper, like, wow, Ashli has a new job every, so often, I also became very keen in understanding when I had mastered a role. And unfortunately, certainly at that time, just because you mastered a role did not equate to you were being promoted within the organization. And so in many instances, I had to promote myself. And so if that meant me seeking out another opportunity, or, fortunately in a lot of instances, those opportunities found me, I knew what the next step needed to be, and what it needed to look like in order for me to say yes. And I think it's also important to note, knowing and understanding those things also makes your no very strong as well, right? Although something can be tempting, like the opportunity to live abroad or the opportunity to travel a bit more, that was something that I really wanted to do. But if it did not fit the stipulations that I needed it to fit, I was okay with saying no in that moment if it meant me saying yes to a better fitted opportunity.
I love that. I love the idea that you developed a plan and every role fit a certain part of your plan. And that's what you were following through with. Let's talk a little bit about where you look for resources and guidance when you're looking to grow as a professional. You talked about using some of the resources at your companies and also other places, but as you continue to grow in your career, where do you look for resources and guidance?
Yeah, so I often advise people to really look to your left and to your right. I think that there's an enormous amount of opportunity for growth that's overlooked because we don't look laterally. We don't look to our colleagues that are maybe where we are, but within other organizations. So I am deeply appreciative of my friends that have amazing roles throughout the industry. And oftentimes, just through conversations with them, we can identify, oh, hey, maybe there's a conference that I haven't heard of, or hey, let me introduce you to someone who may share a different perspective on something. And I really find that super valuable. And of course, all of the amazing organizations in hospitality, right? So all of the conferences that we attend, the
Mhm.
organizations that are consistently publishing resources and information really on a daily basis at this point. That is of deep importance to me as well. And I would also say, lastly, I draw a reasonable amount of inspiration external to our organization, right? External or external to our industry, I should say. And so I draw a ton of inspiration from the tech industry. I tend to pay attention to fashion. Oftentimes, they are solving very similar issues that we have in hospitality. And that usually will spark a little something that makes me think, hey, we could be doing something different on our side of the business.
I love that. I love that. Looking to other industries as well, because we get so focused on just what hospitality is doing, but there can be
Absolutely. It's
creative
all
things
business,
happening other
right?
places. Yeah,
It's all
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, someone doesn't get to where you are without having navigated a few challenges over time. And would you share with our viewers how you like to approach a challenge and maybe a story that illustrates your approach?
yeah, yeah. So I am all about teamwork making the dream work, right? And so if I am facing a mountain that seems a bit high and a bit wide, I have no qualms and zero ego about calling friends to the table. And in many instances, I may have to quarterback that particular exercise, but I know for sure that I don't know everything. But I am also very sure that there is nothing that we all can't solve collectively. And so, gosh, Len, there could be a million examples on this, but I think the greatest challenge, likely that most of us have faced in this industry, has been the pandemic,
Right.
and particularly the past 2 years. And so, I think about my time at AHOA, and when we were looking at bringing back our the AHOA convention is the largest in the industry. How could we make this work? It really took not only all hands on deck internal to AHOA, but also calling in some other folks and asking, hey, what were best practices from the last event that you all held? In engaging our members to understand what they were thinking and feeling, really being boots on the ground and speaking with vendors and suppliers and making sure that everyone was safe to welcome back, 7 or 8,000 attendees in one place. And so, I really can't stress that enough. Is that we do have limitations. As amazing as we are, ourselves and our teams, sometimes it can be very easy to be almost too laser focused on one thing or the way that we've done it before. And so, yeah, that's typically how I approach something. I try to get an external perspective that may not be so deep in it that they can't see above the issue.
That's great. That's really fantastic. So, related to that, one of the concepts that we talk about on DEI advisors is having a personal board of directors to advise you, to guide you. Who do you identify that's part of your group of people that you turn to, and when do you call on them? What types of things do you ask them for help on?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say that my personal board of advisors is probably about 50-50 folks that work in the business, and they are independent owners. They work for brands, they work for other associations. I certainly have maybe two people that also work in higher education because this is a very different flower to pick, very different from the business that we do in hospitality directly. And then also folks that are just really good friends that know me very well personally. that draw off of their strengths from other industries. And so these are the folks that I call when I am considering a new opportunity. These are the folks that I call when, if I have a student that has a really unique need. I am, quickly jumping into the group chat to say, hey, I'm looking for an opportunity for this particular student. Here's what their skill set is. Could someone be able to assist or support? Even when it comes down to, fundraising, all sorts of things. So I really don't think that there's a limit on what I call on them for, or even what they call on me for. And that's what's really great about that, this sort of circle of people that really surround you and uplift you and celebrate you, even when I forget to celebrate myself, right? And so it's really a blessing to have such brilliant minds surrounding me. So I'm grateful.
It's wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about mentors and champions. Who would you credit as being one of your mentors or champions that's had a big impact on your career? And could you share a time when they supported a crucial turning point in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I often am asked, like, oh, well, who mentored you when you were coming up? And, if I'm honest, Lan, I can't really say that there was ever, one steady, consistent person. And I actually think that that's fine. I think as we grow and evolve, our needs grow and change alongside with us. And so I've certainly had, I would probably count them more sponsors, because likely they worked internal to the same organization that I was working for. But I also think that I was like a bit of a wild child, right? And so my interests were very different than the average young professional. When I think back to, maybe anywhere between a year and 5 or 6 years post graduation, I mean, people looked at me like I was crazy when I said that I wanted to own hotels. And frankly, their response a lot of the time was, okay, well, I don't really know how to help you with that, but I can help you with something else, right? And so, and of course, I welcome all of that, because I think all of it has certainly made the difference. I would certainly count likely my greatest champion over the course of my career is the late Ray Bennett of Marriott International. And so Ray was a very dear friend to me for probably close to 20 years. He just passed last year unexpectedly. So such a huge loss for our industry, and just such a beautiful person. But I will certainly say that Ray has cheered me on every step of the way. And so when I think about those crucial sort of decisions alongside of ownership, and that has taken, I now have learned over the course of time that ownership looks many different ways, right? In my mind, it's like, wow, how am I going to raise $60 million to like own a hotel? But that really was what I was focused on as a young person, not understanding that there were opportunities for investment and collaboration and establishing JVs. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that I wanted to own a hotel. But alongside that, I would say, my purpose in this work has always been to establish equity and inclusion for people that looked like me in this business. Because even early on, I noticed many of the rooms that I stepped into, I was often the only woman, or certainly the only Black woman, right? And so from viewing this industry as a double minority, I think that sort of opened the door for, oh, something could be done about this, and maybe I could be the one to contribute to changing what the face of this industry looks like. And so you asked for an example of a crucial decision that had to be made. And so I have always had a passion for education. And so when I got this phone call saying, hey, Ashley, we'd love for you to jump into the classroom and teach 5 classes, and we would really value someone who has industry experience coming into the classroom. And I thought, oh, this is great. I called Ray because frankly, my concern was, Ray, I'm never going to make any money ever again if I go into education. And so it was really Ray's guidance that helped me understand that this is not the end all be all, that there is a purpose that's greater than me, and that it would all fall into place eventually, right? And so he helped me sort of dilute some of that fear that I had that was probably very surface level to begin with, that why can't you do both, right? Why can't you be interested in investment and ownership, but couple that with education? And so it was through many conversations over many days, months, and years that he helped me get settled with understanding that starting at higher education, I knew that that change had to start earlier in folks' career, and so that made a lot of sense for me. And so, yeah, I would definitely credit him with where I am today for sure.
It's a wonderful story about Ray. I love that. So you alluded to something that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and that is related to advocating for ourselves. So a common generalization is that women don't do a good job advocating for ourselves. And maybe that's part of the challenge in seeing women elevated to the C-suite, getting promotions that we're interested in, or doing other things. As a double minority, an African-American woman, you've had to promote yourself to get ahead. What would you tell people who are struggling to find their voice to get something that they really want?
Yeah. I think before you can find your voice, you have to find your value, right? And so you have to understand that you have something super valuable to bring to the table. And whomever you are, wherever you are listening to this, you do bring value to the table. And it's really just a matter of you identifying what that is, and being bold and strong in that. And so once you identify your value, you can certainly identify your voice. I alluded earlier that, your yes should be as strong as your no. And I think a lot of times when it comes to women leaders in this business, we do not negotiate, right? Whatever is offered to us, it's an immediate yes. But I do think that at times there is power in walking away from an opportunity that may seem so amazing. Again, if it's not aligned with the pathway that you've identified for yourself, the direction that you want to go in, tomorrow isn't promised. So, I hear a lot of folks as they're talking through potential career opportunities. Well, I'll just do this for like another 5 years, and then I'll see if I can jump into what it is that I really want to do, where it is that I bring the most value. And so we don't have time for that, man. It is 2022 and we should just get to it, right? And the most direct pathway to that is what I encourage people to pursue.
That's great advice. Let's talk about a little bit the DEI initiatives that you have been involved in. I mentioned that you're a champion for equity and inclusion throughout your career. And in 2015, you founded Hospitality Leaders Today, or HLT 100, whose mission is to develop the next generation of exceptional leaders through 2020 and beyond. Can you share what HLT 100 does and why you started it, and how you managed to do that on top of everything else you've been doing?
Well, that is a question that the answer remains to be unseen, Lan. I have no idea. I started HLT 100 because throughout my travels across the country, I was meeting students and early careerists that frankly had just hit a wall, right? The industry was not what was proposed to them. It was not this super rosy thing that they had read about in textbooks. And they did not have a clear pathway to doing much other than what they were currently doing. And so that was leading them to leaving the industry or moving to part-time. They were going back to school to study things that had nothing to do with hospitality. They were really searching for the next steps. And so Again, in identifying that, this journey to Black executive level leadership starts much earlier than I think most people assume. I said, I will make a personal commitment to developing 100 new leaders across the country over the course of 5 years. And so this was pre-Zoom and pre-video call. I mean, we were on conference calls, and so I essentially created a professional development curriculum for these students that really was to be a supplement over what they were learning in their classrooms. And at the conclusion of the professional development cycle, then I would host an in-person HLT 100 summit in which they would have the really awesome opportunity to connect with leaders that looked like them that were doing extraordinary things in the hospitality industry. So as you could imagine, as a Black hospitality student, to actually meet a Black hotel owner, similar to me at 19, mind blown, right? Or if you're interested in food and beverage, to meet someone that is doing really amazing things in the CPG space or in wine and spirits. It's almost like what a student has dreamed of, you now can see it. We often hear this old adage of, if you can see it, you can be it. And that's why representation really does matter. And that's what HLT 100 became. And so those students now are well on their way to the top of the industry. They are doing phenomenal work. Most of them still in hospitality, if not hospitality adjacent. And so very proud of the work and all of my HLT 100 mentees that are out there. And so through the work of HLT 100, naturally bringing speakers into this summit every year, something else blossomed out of that. So many Black hospitality professionals, I discovered, are really not connected with one another. And so if they're not connected with one another, they're also disconnected from opportunity. And so out of that grew an organization called Hospitality Hued. And so we host honor hours across the country in which we honor a Black hospitality leader in various markets across the country several times throughout the year, and also we'll start hosting an annual conference in which, just to provide a platform for Black leaders in this business to be connected and stay connected with one another.
That's amazing. If HLT 100 was not enough, you also had to start Hospitality Hued.
Right.
I think it's wonderful, the work that you're doing. And now your role as the first director of Howard University's hospitality program here in Washington, D.C. I'm so happy you've moved to my hometown. What are the initial plans for the program, and what are the long-term hopes for what you're establishing now?
Yeah. So all great questions. So the Marriott-Sorenson Center for Hospitality Leadership has been designed to create and sustain a pipeline of Black executive level talent and entrepreneurs in the hospitality industry. So some quick history. There once upon a time was a hospitality management major at Howard University, housed in the School of Business. And so that hospitality program has been gone for quite some time. And so in surveying hospitality programs across the country, against a lot of the research that the Castell Project has published about the lack of Black representation in this business, we knew that something different had to happen here. And so the Center for Hospitality Leadership, it will be unique in that it is not a hospitality degree program. We recognize that hospitality is the business of service. And as such, the students that participate in this center will major in all manner of things, right? So they can major in finance or international business, accounting, architecture, engineering, because we know that our industry offers opportunities across the board, right? And so we know that if we can build strong business leaders, these students will be well posed to lead this industry into the future. And so our goal is to identify the best and brightest. Howard does a great job of that already, that are interested in leading the hospitality industry. And so these students will really be emerged and submerged in all things executive level exposure and leadership. These students will have the opportunity to be connecting with C-suite level executives in our business on a very consistent basis. We want to provide opportunities for international travel, opportunities to engage in case studies to solve real life issues and create real life solutions for the issues that have plagued this industry historically. And so we are super excited about what these students are going to be able to produce as they step into leadership roles in this business.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned that this is not going to actually be a hospitality degree that they're going to be getting. And you and I have talked about in the past that hospitality programs at HBCUs tend to be quite small. And one of the reasons is this perception that there are not a lot of executive opportunities in hospitality for Black leaders. It tends to be more low-paying jobs, is the perception. And when you couple that with Howard University's students being the best and brightest, and they're not really first generation college students, right? Their parents usually have been to college. These are, as you said, the best and brightest. So is that going to be a heavy lift for you to convince them and their parents that looking at the industry through a hospitality lens is a good way to spend their time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure that it'll be a heavy lift. It will be a lift, Lynn. It will certainly be a lift. Because I think historically speaking, when we're talking about hospitality opportunities, particularly to Black and Brown families, their frame of reference for hospitality is, my grandfather was a bellman at a hotel that he couldn't even sleep in, right? He was a server in a hotel that he could have never dined in. They have a grandmother, an aunt that was a housekeeper. And that is, I think that's an important contribution to hospitality, and also important for the context of this conversation, because the work of those individuals is what made it possible for their parents to be able to go to college, right? And so now they're thinking, oh, there's no way in the world that I would maybe, want my child to study something. And it is frankly because the business of hospitality has not been something that has been presented to students of color as a viable career path. And so I think once parents sit down and understand and take a look at a P&L of what a hotel is doing, and more importantly, how these students will be contributing to that, because most of these students will be working in corporate level roles and in corporate functions. And so while they will understand what's happening at the property level, I think helping not only the student, but the student's parents and their families to understand what they're contributing to, these are the largest organizations in the world in many instances, right? That are huge revenue generators, but also huge generators for job opportunities and career opportunities. And so I think when they start thinking about it from that lens, it makes it much easier for parents to say, oh, okay, this is a business similar to any other business, but there is a pathway being carved out specifically for my talented student to be able to pursue. And so, we're excited to have those conversations. We're excited to have examples to be shared with these folks, because again, representation matters, for them to be able to see people that look like them, that are making the decisions every day. I think will be enormously impactful.
Definitely. And if we want to grow the representation of Black leaders in our industry, we need a great pipeline of
Absolutely.
the best and brightest interested in our industry. So thank you for that. Um, so one of my favorite things that we talk about at DEI Advisors is what advice would you give to your younger self? And I really like it because it speaks to the importance of self-reflection as part of your career growth. What would you want 22-year-old Ashli Johnson to know?
Ooh. The 22-year-old Ashli, I would want her to know that it's all possible. It's all possible. I think there was a period of time early on in my career. It wasn't necessarily a how do I go about doing this? It's like, is this even a thing? Can I even pursue this? And so I think some of the best advice that I could offer to any young person is that whatever it is that you believe you want to pursue, I would challenge them to 10x that. Yes, it's possible, and you can do 10 times greater than that. So chase after the 10x version of your current goal.
I love that. That's wonderful. So at DEI Advisors, our mission is to empower personal success. And you've given so much great advice to help people with their careers. Do you have one last nugget, one last piece of advice that you would offer to women and underrepresented groups to better prepare them for career advancement?
Oh, great question. Great question. So I'm going to share some broad advice. I got this from my late uncle, Robert Dale Tanner, Reverend Robert Dale Tanner of New Orleans, Louisiana, would always say, Uncle RD would say, do it now. Whatever it was, do it now, right? And I think about as a woman, as a Black woman, I think oftentimes so many minorities get caught up in when I finish the degree, after I have the baby, after I get the second promotion, let me wait this out for a few more years. I do think that there is power in now, and not to create some unnecessary urgency for anyone. But I do think that we all often are very guilty of casually delaying what it is that we want to pursue. And so do it now would be my final advice.
That is wonderful. Really great advice. Thank you so much, Ashli, for being on our show today.
Thank you.
And I'm going to put up our DEI Advisors website, which is deiadvisors.org, for our viewers, in case you would like to check out other wonderful videos that we've put on our website. And a final thank you so much to Ashli. It's been wonderful to have you on.
My pleasure, Lan. Thank you so much.